He chose me, Emily. After all these years, all those promises he made you, he finally saw the truth. He wants me." Emily stood frozen, the words a poisoned dart twisting in her heart. Her world, carefully constructed over a decade with her husband Richard, was shattering at the feet of this woman, this interloper named Bethany. But little did Bethany know, amidst Emily's shock and pain, a steely resolve was hardening. Emily wasn't about to let her marriage be dismantled by whispers and lies. She had secrets of her own ammunition gathered over months, waiting for the opportune moment. And that moment was fast approaching, a confrontation thick with unspoken truths and a digital recording that held the power to expose everything. What happened next wasn't just a clash of two women. It was a brutal unveiling of deception, loyalty, and the devastating consequences of betrayal. Stay tuned, because you won't believe how this story unfolds. The floral wallpaper in Emily's pristine living room seemed to mock her with its cheerful pattern. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows painting the manicured lawn in hues of orange and gold, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside her. Bethany perched on the edge of the cream-colored sofa, like a predator surveying its territory, delivered her pronouncement with a smug tilt of her head. "He chose me, Emily." The words, though anticipated in the darkest corners of Emily's mind for months, still landed with the force of a physical blow. Her carefully constructed composure wavered, but years of navigating polite society, of hosting Richard's demanding clients, and maintaining a facade of effortless grace kicked in. She wouldn't give Bethany the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. "Did he?" Emily replied, her voice surprisingly steady. She walked towards the fireplace, her gaze fixed on a framed photograph of herself and Richard, taken years ago, on their honeymoon in the Swiss Alps. They looked so young, so full of hope and promise. A pang of grief, sharp and sudden, pierced through her carefully constructed wall. Bethany chuckled a low, throaty sound that grated on Emily's nerves. "Oh yes, he's tired of the charade, Emily. The domesticity. He wants passion, excitement. He wants a real woman." Bethany's eyes flicked pointedly towards Emily's slightly rounded abdomen, a not-so-subtle jab at her 6-month pregnancy. Emily's breath hitched. Bethany knew. Richard had told her. The realization sent a fresh wave of nausea through her. How could he? How could he betray not only her, but their unborn child? "Richard and I have a life together," Emily stated, turning to face Bethany. "A family. Something you clearly know nothing about." Bethany stood up, her movements fluid and confident. She was younger than Emily, probably by at least 5 years, with a sleek, almost predatory beauty. Her expensive dress and designer handbag screamed of the life Richard had undoubtedly started providing her. "A life built on lies, Emily." Bethany countered, her voice laced with a venomous sweetness. "Richard has been unhappy for years. He stayed because it was comfortable, because it was easy. But he doesn't love you anymore. He loves me." Emily finally allowed herself a small, humorless smile. "Love is a funny thing, isn't it, Bethany? It makes people do strange things, like making promises they don't intend to keep, or recording conversations they probably shouldn't." Bethany's smile faltered. A flicker of unease crossed her perfectly made-up features. "What are you talking about?" Emily walked over to a small antique table beside her armchair and picked up her phone. Her fingers danced across the screen, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. The moment of truth. The moment everything would either fall apart completely, or perhaps just perhaps begin to heal in a painful, necessary way. Richard has a certain way of talking when he thinks no one else is listening, Emily said, her voice dangerously soft. He confides in me, you see. Or at least he used to. She tapped the screen again, and a recording began to play, the sound filling the tense silence of the room. It was Richard's voice, unmistakable, smooth and persuasive, but the words he spoke were not meant for Emily. They were for Bethany. "You're everything I've ever wanted, my darling. Emily. Well, Emily is comfortable. Safe. But you, Bethany, you set my soul on fire." Bethany's face paled. Her confident posture seemed to deflate. She opened her mouth to speak, but Emily raised a hand, silencing her. The recording continued, painting a vivid picture of Richard's deceit, his calculated manipulation of both women. He spoke of his plans for the future, a future that unequivocally included Bethany and excluded Emily and their unborn child. As Richard's voice filled the room, detailing his lies and his affections for Bethany, the smugness on Bethany's face completely dissolved. It was replaced by a look of dawning horror, as if she suddenly realized she wasn't the sole recipient of Richard's affections, or perhaps that the man she thought she knew was capable of such profound duplicity. Emily watched her, a grim satisfaction growing in her chest. This wasn't the victory she had envisioned, not amidst the wreckage of her marriage. But it was a start. It was the unveiling of the truth, a truth that Bethany could no longer ignore. The recording ended, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Emily looked at Bethany, her eyes clear and unwavering. "He chose you," you said, "based on what his lies to me, or his lies to you." The aftermath of the audio recording was a maelstrom of emotions. Bethany, initially defiant, now stood ashen-faced, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. The realization that Richard had been weaving a web of deceit around both of them was clearly sinking in. I didn't know," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. He told me you two were just going through the motions, that he was staying for appearances." Emily simply raised an eyebrow, her silence more damning than any accusation. "He said he was going to tell you," Bethany continued, her voice gaining a desperate edge. "He said he just needed the right time." "The right time?" Emily repeated, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Was the right time after our baby was born, after he had completely dismantled our lives?" Tears welled up in Bethany's eyes. Whether they were tears of genuine remorse or self-pity, Emily couldn't tell, and frankly didn't care. I'm so sorry, Emily," Bethany choked out. "I truly didn't realize." Emily doubted the sincerity of her apology. Bethany hadn't seemed particularly concerned about Emily's feelings when she'd delivered her smug pronouncement moments earlier. "Did you ever stop to think about me, Bethany?" Emily asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her efforts to remain composed. "Did you ever consider the woman whose husband you were sleeping with, the woman who was carrying his child?" Bethany flinched as if struck. She couldn't meet Emily's gaze, her eyes fixed on the expensive Persian rug beneath her feet. The sound of a key turning in the front door echoed through the tense silence. Richard. He was home. Both women turned as he walked into the living room, a briefcase in his hand and a tired smile on his face. The smile quickly vanished when he took in the scene. Emily standing by the fireplace, her phone in her hand, and Bethany looking pale and distraught on the sofa. "What's going on?" he asked, his eyes darting between the two women, a flicker of apprehension in their depths. Emily didn't say a word. She simply pressed play on her phone again, the sound of Richard's voice filling the room, detailing his lies and his supposed love for Bethany. Richard's face drained of color as the recording played. He stood frozen, his briefcase clattering to the floor. When the recording ended, he finally found his voice, his eyes full, pleading with Emily. "Emily, please, let me explain." "Explain what, Richard?" Emily asked, her voice cold and hard. "Explain how you systematically betrayed me. Explain how you were planning to abandon your pregnant wife for this woman." She gestured towards Bethany with a dismissive wave of her hand. Bethany flinched again, a fresh wave of tears streaming down her face. "It's not like that," Richard insisted, taking a step towards Emily. I was confused. I made a mistake." "A mistake?" Emily repeated, her voice rising. "Richard, you were planning a whole new life with her. You told her you loved her. You talked about leaving me." "I didn't mean it," he said, his voice desperate. "I was just saying things." "Saying things?" Emily scoffed. "Richard, I have months of these recordings, months of you telling her how unhappy you are with me, how much you love her, how you can't wait to be with her. Was all of that just saying things?" Richard remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor. He knew he was caught. The silence stretched thick with unspoken accusations and shattered trust. Bethany finally broke it, her voice trembling. "Richard," she asked, her eyes searching his, Did you really mean all those things you said to me?" Richard looked at her, his expression conflicted. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The silence that followed was deafening. In that moment, Bethany seemed to understand the depth of Richard's deception. He hadn't just been lying to Emily. He had been lying to her as well. He had painted a picture of a future together, based on the destruction of his current life, without ever fully committing to it. "Get out," Emily said, her voice low but firm, her eyes fixed on Richard. "Get out of my house." Richard looked at her, his face etched with despair. "Emily, please, don't do this. We can work through this. We have a baby on the way." "No, Richard," Emily said, shaking her head. "We don't have anything anymore. You destroyed it. Now get out." Richard hesitated for a moment. Then, with a defeated sigh, he turned and walked towards the door. He glanced back once his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and fear before disappearing. Emily watched him go, a strange mix of relief and devastation washing over her. It was over. Her marriage, her life as she knew it, was over. But as she looked down at her slightly swollen belly, a flicker of determination ignited within her. She wasn't alone. She had her child to think of now, and she would be strong for both of them. Bethany was still sitting on the sofa, her face buried in her hands, sobbing quietly. Emily looked at her, her expression unreadable. She felt no sympathy for the other woman. Bethany had played a role in this, had knowingly entered into an affair with a married man. She was a victim of Richard's lies, but she was not entirely innocent. "You should leave too, Bethany," Emily said, her voice devoid of emotion. Bethany looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't know," Emily replied flatly. "But it's not here." Bethany nodded slowly, understanding. She stood up, her legs shaky. She picked up her handbag and walked towards the door, pausing for a moment to look back at Emily. "I really am sorry," she whispered, before letting herself out. Emily was left alone in the silent living room, the remnants of the afternoon's dramatic confrontation hanging heavy in the air. She sank into her armchair, exhaustion washing over her. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of hope. The truth was out, and now she could begin to rebuild her life for herself and for her child. The days that followed were a blur of legal consultations, tearful phone calls with her supportive sister Olivia, and the daunting task of facing a future she never imagined. Richard made several attempts to contact her, leaving pleading voicemails and sending a barrage of text messages, all of which Emily ignored. She had instructed her lawyer, Mr. Davies, to handle all communication. Olivia arrived a few days later, her usually cheerful face etched with concern. She enveloped Emily in a tight hug, her presence a comforting anchor in the swirling storm of Emily's emotions. "I can't believe he did this. Olivia said, her voice filled with anger. That swine," Emily managed a weak smile. "He did. But I'll be okay. We'll be okay." Olivia stayed for a week, helping Emily navigate the initial shock and practicalities of her new reality. She sorted through Richard's belongings, packing them away with a grim satisfaction, and helped Emily begin to envision a life without him. One afternoon, while they were going through some old photographs, Olivia stumbled upon a box tucked away in the back of a closet. It was filled with letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. "What are these?" Olivia asked, handing the box to Emily. Emily opened it hesitantly. The letters were addressed to Richard, the handwriting elegant and familiar. It was her mother who had passed away a few years ago. Emily hadn't seen these before. As she read through the letters, a different picture of her marriage began to emerge. Her mother, it turned out, had harbored deep reservations about Richard from the very beginning. Her letters were filled with subtle warnings, observations about his character that Emily had dismissed at the time as her mother being overly protective. "He seems charming, dear," one letter read, written shortly after Emily and Richard started dating. "But there's a certain shallowness in his eyes that troubles me. Be careful, my love. Make sure you truly know the man you're giving your heart to." Another letter, written a year before their wedding, was more direct. "Emily, I know you love Richard, but I have my doubts. He seems more interested in your family's connections than in you yourself. Please think carefully before you commit to this." Tears streamed down Emily's face as she read her mother's words. It was as if her mother had seen the truth all along, the truth that Emily had been too blinded by love to recognize. A wave of regret washed over her. If only she had listened. Olivia put a comforting arm around her. "Mom always had a good instinct about people," she said softly. "Don't beat yourself up, Em. You loved him. You believed in him." The discovery of the letters, while painful, also provided a strange sense of validation. It wasn't that Emily had been completely naive. There had been doubts, whispers of unease that she had pushed aside. Her mother had seen them too. A few weeks later, Emily received an unexpected email. It was from a woman named Vivian, who identified herself as Bethany's sister. The email was brief but intriguing. Vivian wrote that Bethany had been devastated by the revelations and that she had some information that she thought Emily should know. She requested a meeting. Emily was hesitant. She didn't want to get drawn into Bethany's family drama. But there was something in the tone of the email that piqued her curiosity. After discussing it with Olivia and Mr. Davies, she decided to agree to a meeting. They met at a small, discreet cafe downtown. Vivian was a striking woman, with a sharp intelligence in her eyes. She looked nothing like Bethany. "Thank you for meeting with me, Emily," Vivian said, her voice serious. "I know this must be difficult." "It is," Emily replied, her gaze steady. "Bethany has been A mess since everything happened. Vivian continued. She feels incredibly foolish and betrayed. But that's not why I wanted to meet you. Vivian leaned forward, her voice dropping slightly. I know Richard better than you might think. Bethany wasn't the first. There have been others. Many others. Emily stared at her stunned. Richard has a pattern, Vivian explained. He charms women, makes grand promises, and then moves on. Bethany fell for it, just like the others before her. Vivian then shared details of Richard's past relationships, stories of similar betrayals and broken promises. She even had some emails and messages that corroborated her claims. Emily listened in stunned silence. It was like a puzzle falling into place, explaining the inconsistencies and red flags she had ignored over the years. Why are you telling me this? Emily finally asked. Because I know what it's like to be hurt by Richard, Vivian said, her eyes filled with a sad understanding. He did something similar to a friend of mine a few years ago. I tried to warn Bethany, but she wouldn't listen. I don't want to see him get away with this again. You deserve to know the truth. Vivian's revelations were a bitter pill to swallow. It confirmed Emily's worst fears about Richard's character. But it also gave her a sense of closure. His betrayal wasn't about her. It was about him. It was a pattern of behavior that she had unknowingly become a part of. As Vivian left, she handed Emily a small USB drive. There's more on there. Things that might be helpful in your divorce proceedings. Emily looked at the USB drive in her hand, a sense of grim determination settling within her. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting against a man who had systematically deceived and manipulated the women in his life. And she wouldn't let him get away with it. The divorce proceedings were acrimonious as expected. Richard, initially contrite, soon turned defensive, his lawyers painting Emily as a vengeful and unstable woman. They tried to discredit the audio recordings, claiming they were selectively edited and taken out of context. However, Mr. Davies was a seasoned lawyer, and with the additional information provided by Vivian, they were able to build a strong case against Richard. The evidence of his repeated infidelity and his calculated attempts to deceive Emily painted a clear picture of his character. The pregnancy added another layer of complexity to the proceedings. Richard initially expressed a desire to be involved in the child's life, but his actions spoke louder than his words. His focus remained on protecting his assets and his reputation. The local media caught wind of the story, and soon Emily found herself the unwilling subject of public scrutiny. The details of Richard's affair and the audio recordings were sensationalized, turning her private pain into public entertainment. Olivia became Emily's staunch protector, shielding her from unwanted attention and offering unwavering emotional support. She stayed with Emily throughout the legal battles, attending court hearings and providing a much-needed distraction from the constant stress. One evening, as they were watching television, a news report about the divorce came on. The reporter painted Richard as a successful businessman caught in a moment of weakness, while Emily was portrayed as the bitter, jilted wife seeking revenge. "This is outrageous," Olivia exclaimed, grabbing the remote to turn off the television. "They're twisting everything." Emily sighed. "It doesn't matter what they say, Liv. The truth will come out in court." But the public scrutiny took its toll. Emily found it difficult to go out, constantly feeling the eyes of strangers upon her. The whispers and the judgment were relentless. Unexpected support came from an unlikely source. Bethany, who had largely disappeared after the initial confrontation, reached out to Emily again. This time her message was different. She offered to testify on Emily's behalf, to corroborate the authenticity of the audio recordings, and to share her own experience of Richard's deception. Emily was surprised by the offer. She had initially viewed Bethany as the enemy, the woman who had tried to steal her husband. But now, she saw her as another victim of Richard's lies. Bethany's testimony in court was powerful and damaging to Richard's case. She spoke candidly about his promises, his manipulations, and the shock she felt when she realized he had been leading a double life. Vivienne also testified, providing a detailed account of Richard's history of infidelity and his pattern of exploiting women. Her testimony further undermined his credibility and strengthened Emily's case. As the trial drew to a close, the judge delivered a verdict that was largely in Emily's favor. Richard was ordered to pay a significant amount in alimony and child support. Emily was granted full custody of their unborn child. It wasn't a complete victory. The emotional scars of Richard's betrayal would take time to heal. But Emily had stood her ground, fought for herself and her child, and emerged with a sense of resilience she didn't know she possessed. The public scrutiny eventually subsided, replaced by a sense of admiration for Emily's strength and determination. She became a symbol of a woman who had refused to be a victim, who had fought for her truth and won. As her due date approached, Emily felt a mix of trepidation and excitement. She was facing motherhood alone, but she knew she wasn't truly alone. She had Olivia, her supportive friends, and a newfound inner strength to guide her. Richard made a few final attempts to reconcile, sending flowers and letters filled with remorseful words. But Emily remained resolute. The trust was broken beyond repair. She couldn't forgive him for the pain he had caused not just to her, but to their unborn child. The experience had changed her. She was no longer the naive and trusting woman she once was. She had learned the hard way about the complexities of love and betrayal, but she had also discovered her own strength and resilience. As she prepared to welcome her child into the world, Emily looked towards the future with a sense of cautious optimism. The road ahead would be challenging, but she was ready to face it, head held high with her child by her side. Baby Lily arrived not with a whisper, but with a fierce, determined cry on a crisp autumn morning, as if announcing to the world that she was a force to be reckoned with. The labor had been long and arduous, a physical trial that mirrored the emotional marathon Emily had been running for the past year. In the sterile, white-walled delivery room, Emily felt a primal fear mixed with an overwhelming sense of anticipation. Her sister Olivia was a constant, calming presence, her hand a firm anchor on Emily's shoulder, her voice a steady stream of encouragement that cut through the haze of pain. "You're doing it, Em. You're so strong." "She's almost here," Olivia whispered, wiping Emily's brow with a cool cloth. In those final, grueling moments, Richard's face flashed through Emily's mind. Not the man from the audio recording the deceitful stranger, but the man she had once loved, the man who should have been holding her other hand. A sharp pang of grief, the last ghost of a dead marriage twisted in her gut. But then it was gone, replaced by a surge of pure, unadulterated power. She wasn't doing this for him or in spite of him. She was doing this for herself and for the new life she was bringing into the world. And then Lily was there. Placed on Emily's chest, she was a tiny, perfect bundle of warmth and life. Her cries quieted as she felt her mother's heart beat, her small, wrinkled face a masterpiece of creation. Emily looked down at her daughter, and a love so profound, so instantaneous, washed over her, cleansing every last corner of her heart that had been tarnished by betrayal. The pain of the past year, the public humiliation, the legal battles, it all dissolved in that one sacred moment. Lily was her future, her purpose, her redemption. Tears streamed down Emily's face, but for the first time in a long time, they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. Olivia was crying too, her smile radiant. In that room, a new family had been forged, one built not on lies, but on an unbreakable bond of love and resilience. The first few months of motherhood were a disorienting blend of exhaustion and ecstasy. The world shrank to the four walls of the nursery, the rhythm of life dictated by 2-hour feeding schedules and the seemingly endless cycle of diaper changes. There were nights when Emily, swaying back and forth at 3 a.m. with a fussy Lily in her arms, felt an acute, bone-deep loneliness. The silence of the house was a stark reminder that she was doing this alone. In those moments of vulnerability, doubts would creep in. Could she do this? Was she enough? During one such night, as moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating the sleeping face of her daughter, Emily looked down at Lily and found her answer. She traced the delicate curve of Lily's cheek, marveling at her tiny, perfect fingers curled around her own. This was enough. She was enough. The love she felt for this child was a vast, unshakable continent, a source of strength she had never known she possessed. She had faced down her husband's betrayal, navigated a brutal public divorce, and brought this beautiful life into the world. A fussy baby and sleepless nights were battles she could and would win. Olivia, who had taken an extended leave from work to stay, was her lifeline, often appearing at her door with a hot cup of tea and taking Lily for a few hours, so Emily could catch a precious hour or two of sleep. Her support was a constant, tangible reminder that alone did not mean unsupported. Richard's presence in their new life was as awkward and jarring as a wrong note in a beautiful symphony. As per the court's decree, he was allowed supervised visits. The first one took place when Lily was 2 months old. He arrived at the door looking uncomfortable in his expensive suit, holding an ostentatiously large teddy bear that was bigger than his daughter. Olivia answered the door, her expression frosty, and led him into the living room, where Emily sat with Lily cradled in her arms. "She's small," Richard said, his voice hesitant. It was a stupid, obvious thing to say, and it hung in the air between them. "She's a baby, Richard," Emily replied, her tone neutral. She refused to give him the satisfaction of an emotional reaction. He sat stiffly on the opposite sofa, his eyes darting between Emily and the child he had so callously been prepared to abandon. He made a fumbling attempt to hold Lily, but his touch was unsure, his movements clumsy. Lily, sensing his unease, began to fuss. Emily took her back, her movements fluid and practiced, and Lily immediately settled against her mother's chest. The contrast was stark. Richard was a visitor, a stranger in their world. He talked about his work, about a recent business trip, his words filling the space but signifying nothing. He never once asked how Emily was coping. The visits continued in this vein, stilted 1-hour performances once a fortnight. He always brought an expensive gift, a substitute for genuine emotion, and always seemed relieved when the hour was up. For Emily, the visits were a necessary evil, a legal obligation to be endured. She saw no flicker of a true bond, forming only a man going through the motions, perhaps to assuage his own guilt or maintain a public facade of fatherhood. As Lily grew out of her newborn haze and into an infant with a burgeoning personality, Emily knew she needed to rebuild her professional life. Relying on the alimony and her savings wasn't a long-term plan. She craved the independence and self-worth that came from her own work. Drawing on her previous career in marketing, she began taking on small freelance projects. She turned a spare bedroom into a home office, working during Lily's naps and late into the night. It was a juggling act of monumental proportions. There were days she felt she was failing at everything. A missed deadline because Lily was sick. A feeling of guilt for being on her laptop when Lily wanted to play. Her first major breakthrough came from a local artisanal bakery looking to revamp their online presence. Emily poured her heart into the project, her creativity long dormant sparking back to life. She designed a beautiful website, launched a clever social media campaign, and their online sales tripled in 2 months. The owner was ecstatic and recommended her to other small businesses. Word of mouth began to spread. Slowly but surely, Emily built a roster of clients and a reputation for being talented, reliable, and incredibly dedicated. Each successfully completed project, each positive client review, was another brick in the foundation of her new life. She wasn't just Richard's ex-wife anymore. She was Emily Peterson, a successful marketing consultant and a damn good mother. One sunny afternoon, about 1.5 years after the divorce, Emily was at the park pushing a giggling Lily on the swings. She looked up and saw a familiar face walking towards her. It was Vivian Bethany's sister. A knot of apprehension tightened in Emily's stomach, but Vivian's smile was warm and held no trace of animosity. "Emily." "I thought that was you," Vivian said, stopping a few feet away. "Your daughter is beautiful." "Thank you, Emily," said her surprise evident. "It's good to see you. I'm just in town, visiting a friend," Vivian explained. "I hoped I might run into you. I wanted to say, well, I often think about how strong you were through all of that." They found a nearby bench and sat watching Lily attempt to climb the slide. The conversation was surprisingly easy. Vivian updated Emily on Bethany. She had moved to the West Coast, enrolled in a design course, and was in a new, healthier relationship. It took her a long time to get over the humiliation Vivian admitted. She finally understood that she wasn't Richard's great love. She was just a convenient escape, a part of his pattern. Testifying against him was the first step in her taking her own power back. In a strange way, you helped her do that. Vivian then hesitated before continuing. "You know, I heard Richard remarried. A woman from a wealthy family in oil. Apparently the same old stories are starting to surface. Rumors of him being a little too friendly with his new assistant. Some things never change." The news didn't bring Emily pleasure, but a profound sense of validation. It was the final definitive proof that the collapse of her marriage had never been her fault. The flaw was in Richard's character, a crack that ran so deep it was irreparable. He would likely spend his life chasing the next thrill, leaving a trail of broken promises in his wake. As Vivian left, she squeezed Emily's arm. "You built a real life, Emily. He never knew how." Years slipped by, each one fuller and happier than the last. Lily grew into a bright, funny, and compassionate little girl, with her mother's eyes and Olivia's mischievous grin. Their small house was filled with finger paintings, laughter, and the scent of freshly baked cookies. Emily's business thrived, allowing her to provide a stable, comfortable life for them. She built a tight-knit community of friends, mostly other mothers from Lily's school who became her chosen family. On the eve of Lily's 5th birthday, as Emily was tucking her into bed, Lily looked up at her with serious eyes. "Mummy," she asked, "why doesn't Daddy live with us?" "Chloe's daddy lives with them." Emily's heart constricted, but she had prepared for this question. She sat on the edge of the bed and took Lily's small hand in hers. "Well, sweetie," she began, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes mummies and daddies realize they are better at being friends when they live in different houses. Your daddy and I love you very, very much, but we just couldn't live in the same house anymore." It doesn't mean we love you any less. In fact, it means we both get to love you in our own special way. It was a simplified truth, but it was a truth nonetheless free from the bitterness and anger that could so easily poison a child's heart. Lily seemed to accept this snuggling into her pillow. Later that evening, sitting in the quiet living room with a photo album, Emily looked at a picture of herself heavily pregnant, standing defiantly in that same room. She remembered the venom in Bethany's voice. He chose me. It felt like a lifetime ago, a scene from someone else's life. The whisper that was meant to destroy her had in fact been a catalyst. It had forced her to confront a painful truth, to tear down a life built on a faulty foundation, and to rebuild something stronger and more authentic in its place. Her happiness was not a fairy tale ending where a new Prince Charming rode in to save her. Emily had saved herself. Her happiness was in the quiet moments. Lily's laughter echoing in the garden, a successful client presentation, a glass of wine shared with Olivia on the porch. It was a mosaic of small, hard-won joys. She had faced the worst kind of betrayal, and had not only survived but thrived. She had found a new beginning, not in the arms of another, but in the strength of her own heart and the unconditional love of her child. She was whole. She was free. And that was a victory greater than any she could have imagined. 2 years passed, painting over the past with the vibrant colors of the present. Lily, now a bright and inquisitive 7-year-old, was the sun around which Emily's world happily orbited. Their life had settled into a comfortable, joyful rhythm. Mornings were a chaotic dance of finding matching socks and packing lunch boxes. Afternoons were for homework and trips to the park. And evenings were for shared stories and whispered secrets before bed. Emily's freelance business had flourished to the point where she'd hired a part-time assistant, and she had even begun tentatively dating a kind divorced father named Robert she'd met at a school fundraiser. It was slow and cautious, but it was another sign that the frost around her heart had finally thawed. The peace she had so painstakingly built felt solid, unshakable. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, shattering the quiet hum of her home office. The name flashing on the screen was one she hadn't seen in months, Richard. Her hand hovered over the phone, every instinct screaming at her to decline. Their interactions had dwindled to brief transactional emails about child support payments and scheduling his quarterly supervised visit, which he had cancelled more often than not in the last year. A direct call was an anomaly, and anomalies involving Richard were never good. Steeling herself, she answered. "Emily," he said. His voice was different. The smooth, confident cadence was gone, replaced by a frayed, desperate edge. "I need to see you. I need to talk to you about Lily. We can communicate via email, Richard." "That's our agreement," Emily replied, her voice cool and measured. "No, not about a visit," he stammered. "It's more than that. Everything's changed. My life, it's fallen apart. She left me, Em. Caroline left me, and she took everything." He let out a dry, rattling sob. "I've lost my job. I have nothing. All I have left is Lily. I want to be a father to her. A real father. I'm moving back. I'm going to petition the court for joint custody." The words hit Emily like a physical blow. Joint custody. The idea of surrendering Lily to this broken, unpredictable man for half her life was unthinkable. The stable, loving world she had built for her daughter suddenly felt fragile, like a house of cards threatened by a hurricane. "You can't be serious, Richard," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. "I've never been more serious," he insisted. "I've made mistakes. God, I know I have. But I'm a different person now. Hitting rock bottom, it changes you. Lily deserves a father, and I'm ready to be one. If you fight me, I'll take you to court. I'll spend every last cent I have." After the call ended, Emily sat frozen in her chair, the silence of the room pressing in on her. The ghost she thought she had vanquished was back, rattling its chains, threatening to undo everything. She immediately called Olivia, who listened to the whole story with growing fury. "He's not a changed man." He's a desperate one," Olivia seethed. "He's not doing this for Lily. He's doing it for himself. He's grasping for an anchor, and he's trying to make our niece his emotional life raft. You can't let him." The next day, Emily sat in the polished conference room of her lawyer's office. Mr. Davies, his face grim, laid out the stark reality. "He has a right to petition the court, Emily. And frankly, judges tend to favor increased parental involvement if the parent can demonstrate stability. His current situation is a mess, which is in our favor. But if he gets a job, finds a decent place to live, and presents himself as a repentant father seeking to make amends, a judge might well grant him unsupervised visitation, perhaps even working up to an overnight schedule. A full-blown custody battle would be long, expensive, and emotionally devastating for Lily." Emily left the lawyer's office feeling trapped. The legal system, in its detached wisdom, couldn't see the years of manipulation, the pattern of selfishness, the fundamental character flaws that the audio recording had only scratched the surface of. It only saw a biological father seeking his rights. The stress began to manifest in subtle ways. Emily found herself staring blankly at her computer screen. Her focus shattered. She was short-tempered and distracted, and Lily, with a child's unerring sensitivity, noticed immediately. One evening, while they were building a Lego castle on the living room floor, Lily looked up at her. "Are you sad, Mommy?" "No, sweetie." "Just thinking a lot," Emily said, forcing a smile. "Is it about Daddy?" Lily asked, her voice small. At school, she was surrounded by children with different family structures, but the idealized image of a fun dad who threw a baseball and came to every soccer game was a powerful one. Chloe's dad taught her how to ride her bike without training wheels. "Is my daddy ever going to teach me things?" The innocent question was like a knife in Emily's heart. Was her own fear, her protective instinct, denying her daughter something essential? The conflict raging within her was immense. Her mind knew Richard was a risk, but her heart ached for her daughter, who was beginning to feel a void that Emily, for all her love, could not fill. Against Olivia's strenuous objections and her own better judgment, Emily agreed to meet Richard. Not for Lily's sake, she told herself, but to gather intelligence to see for herself if there was any substance to his claims of transformation. She chose a busy, impersonal coffee shop downtown, a neutral territory where emotion could be kept in check. The man who sat across from her was a shadow of the person she had married. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by worn jeans and a faded polo shirt. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his once immaculate hair was unkempt. He looked tired and defeated. "Thank you for coming," he said, his hands wrapped around a paper cup as if for warmth. "I'm here to listen, Richard. That's all," Emily stated, her posture rigid, her purse clutched in her lap like a shield. He launched into a rambling, self-pitying monologue about his failed marriage to Caroline, her betrayal, his financial ruin, the friends who had abandoned him. It was all about him, his pain, his loss, his suffering. He spoke of Lily as his one chance at redemption, his reason to get his life back on track. He wanted to prove to the world and to himself that he wasn't a failure. Lily, it was clear, was not a daughter to be loved, but a project to be completed, a final exam to prove his worth. Emily listened with a growing sense of clarity. This wasn't change. It was desperation wearing the mask of fatherly devotion. He hadn't once asked about Lily's interests, her friends, her fears, or her triumphs. He spoke of her as a concept, not a person. "So what you're saying," Emily cut in her voice devoid of sympathy, "is that now that your life has imploded, you've decided you want to be a father." Richard flinched. "It's not like that. I've always loved her." "Love is an action, Richard." Emily said the words coming easily, now born of years of reflection. "It's about showing up. It's about putting someone else's needs before your own. You want joint custody. Tell me, what is Lily's teacher's name? What's her best friend's name? What is she afraid of in the dark? What's the name of the stuffed elephant? She can't sleep without silence. A deep, damning silence." Richard stared into his coffee cup, unable to answer a single question. "That's what I thought," Emily said, her voice softening slightly, not with pity, but with a sad finality. "You don't know your daughter, Richard. You know the idea of her, and you are not going to use her to fix your broken life." Still, for Lily's sake, Emily agreed to a single trial run, one unsupervised afternoon. She laid out the terms like a peace treaty. He would pick Lily up at noon on Saturday and take her to the public library, and then for ice cream. He would have her home by 4 o'clock sharp. He was not to discuss his personal problems or ask her questions about Emily's life. His focus was to be entirely on Lily. The anxiety Emily felt that Saturday was a palpable thing. She watched from the window as Richard's beat-up sedan pulled up. She knelt down and gave Lily a tight hug. "Remember, sweetie, if you feel uncomfortable at all, you use the phone I gave you and you call me. Immediately. I'll be there in 5 minutes." For 4 hours, Emily paced the house, unable to settle. She tidied already clean rooms, organized bookshelves, and checked her phone every 30 seconds. She tried to work, but the words on the screen blurred. This was a new kind of hell, this willing surrender of control, this forced trust in a man who had proven himself pathologically untrustworthy. At exactly 4 o'clock, Richard's car pulled into the driveway. Emily rushed to the door as Lily came bounding up the path. "How was it, my love?" Emily asked, her eyes scanning Lily's face for any sign of distress. "It was okay," Lily said, shrugging. "We went to the library, but Daddy's phone kept ringing, so we didn't stay long. He was talking to some man about money. He seemed sad. And then at the ice cream place, he asked me if Mr. Robert was your new husband, and if he was rich." Emily's blood ran cold. He had failed the test. Spectacularly. He had not only broken the rules he had revealed in the clearest possible terms that his focus was still entirely on himself, his problems, and his jealousy. He had used his precious few hours with his daughter to worry about his finances and pry into her own life. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Emily called him. "It's over, Richard. The experiment failed. Our arrangement stands as it is. Supervised visits when you deign to show up. If you try to take me to court, I will use every resource I have to show the judge exactly who you are. I have your daughter's testimony about today, and I assure you it will be very persuasive." He started to bluster to protest, but there was no conviction in it. He knew he'd been caught. The fight went out of him, replaced by a weary resignation. hanging up. Emily felt a profound sense of relief, but also a lingering sadness. A sadness for Lily, who deserved better. She went into her daughter's room and watched her sleep the stuffed elephant tucked securely under her arm. Her peace had been tested. The echoes of a ghost had threatened her sanctuary, but her foundation was stronger now. She had met the threat head-on, not with the fiery rage of a betrayed wife, but with the calm, unshakable resolve of a mother bear protecting her cub. She knew with absolute certainty that this would not be the last challenge, but she also knew that she was more than capable of meeting it. Her happily ever after wasn't a destination free of storms. It was the sturdy, loving shelter she had built to weather them. And in that shelter, she and her daughter were safe. Emily's story is a raw and powerful reminder that appearances can be deceiving and betrayal can come from the most unexpected places. But it's also a testament to the incredible strength and resilience of the human spirit. Emily faced unimaginable heartbreak with courage, using the very weapon meant to wound her, the audio recording, to expose the truth and reclaim her life. She didn't succumb to victimhood. Instead, she rose above the ashes, built a beautiful future for herself and her daughter, and found happiness on her own terms. This story is for anyone who has ever felt betrayed, for anyone who has had to pick up the pieces and start over. Remember Emily's strength, her determination, and her unwavering focus on building a better future. If Emily's story resonated with you, please give this video a like, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories of drama, resilience, and triumph. Your support helps us bring these important narratives to a wider audience. What are your thoughts on Emily's journey? Share your comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Here, Paul.